All materials, all materials presented to the boards and committees are also accessible through the town's website. All members of boards and committees are in person, as this is a in-person meeting. I am Doug Lucenti, Chair of the Select Board, and joining me from the Select Board tonight is Joe Pato. Joe's right there. Our Vice Chair, Jill Hay, and Mark Sandine. And Susie Barry will be joining us shortly. Joining us from staff this evening, we have lots of members of staff, but I would like to point out our new town manager, Steve Bartha, is with us. Steve started today. Please welcome Steve. Good way to start off your first day at work with a couple long meetings. I also want to take a moment to thank Dr. Hackett for spearheading tonight's retreat and putting all the details together to make this happen. Much appreciated by all of us who are here. I'll ask now the chairs of the various committees to call their committees to order. So we'll start with Ms. Sani. There you are.
Okay. So I'm Deepika Sani. I'm the vice chair of the school committee, and I call this meeting to order. With me, I have my colleagues Kathleen Lenahan, Sarah Cuthbertson, and I don't believe Larry Freeman is here, but I'll check, and when he comes, I'll let you know. And we have staff here too. We have Dr. Hackett. Okay, thank you, and that's it for us.
Thank you.
Right, and we have Dr. Kavanaugh with us as well. Thank you.
Great. And I think I neglected to mention we have our Deputy Town Manager, Kelly Axtell, here. Melissa Petit, our Director of Recreation. We have Mike Cronin from our Facilities Department, and we have Carolyn Kostnoff, our Finance, Assistant Town Manager for Finance. I think that's everyone from staff. Mr. Parker, could you call the Appropriation Committee to order and introduce your members? Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Lamb, could you call the Capital Expenditures Committee to order? I was just informed that for LexMedia to hear us, we do need to speak into microphones. So we won't restart this, but I will pass the mic, or please use the mic at the thing, so that this is good information for later on this evening when we reconvene. Ms. Lenahan, could you please call the School Building Committee to order and introduce your members? You can use that one.
Thank you. I'm again Kathleen Lenahan. I'm calling the School Building Committee to order, and I'm not sure. We'll see who's here. Mike Cronin, Mark Barrett, Joe Pato, Chuck Favazzo, John Himmel. I don't think is Andrew Baker here. I don't think he could be. Carolyn Kosnoff, Shingmin Shah, Ksenia Slavsky. Dan Boss, and and our new town manager, who is our newest member.
6 hours on the committees.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I think that's. Oh, and Dr. Yes, and there we go. Thank you.
And is Mr. Boatwell here? He's going to be a little late. I don't know that I see a quorum of Recreation Committee. We have one member so far. Oh, yes. All right, well, we'll wait till the quorum is available, then they can call themselves. Okay. A couple quick housekeeping items. This evening's meeting, again, is a working meeting of the 6 committees. We will not be taking any public comments. Members of the public are free to listen, but kindly, we ask that you not participate in the breakout sessions as they are for members of the committees who are participating tonight. So we're going to just jump right into our first item on the agenda, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hackett.
Thank you. Good evening. We're going to start with some school building committee norms that we use for this process. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, it's good to have everybody in the room together. It's really good to have members of the public join us. Our school building committee process starts with norms when we're engaged in this kind of conversation because it's different. So one of the things that we like to say is prepare for it to be messy. It's not going to be a neat, tidy meeting like we're used to. It's going to be different. And the idea is that you get to engage face-to-face with project team members to ask your questions. Don't be afraid to ask whatever questions are on your mind. We've tried to frame essential questions for you for each station, so I'll talk about that. You're essentially going to be turning around to your stations. I'll explain who's in which station in a moment. There's room for 3 stations here, and then there's room down the hall for 1 private station, and we can decide whether it's group 1 or group 2, 3, or 4 who get that. In addition to get ready for a messy process, also want to let you know that it's really good to keep an open mind in this process, be respectful, encourage free debate, ask a lot of questions, and give suggestions regarding our work. This one is for people like me who like to talk. We like to say, check your airtime. If you are an external processor, try to be an internal processor today. Do the opposite of what you normally do. We also want to have people celebrate accomplishments. There's been some good work that's been done. When we dig into problems, we forget that good work sometimes, so we encourage you to stay focused on the positive as well. And we want you to ask all the questions that you need to have answered in preparation for you as boards and committees to make an informed decision about the things that are happening next. Our real purpose for being here this evening is to get your input before we make the big decision about which design concept or massing concept we're going to move forward with on the 12th, and to hear important feedback about various options. Now let me talk about stations. So you're all assigned to a station. There's no real method to this assignment other than I went down the list and said who's on appropriation, who's on capital expenditures, and tried to put one of you from each group in the groups, and then adjusted them accordingly to try to have a balance of male and female and so on and so forth. So those are the groups, and if you are numbered 1, you can see that there are assignments regarding a note taker, a timekeeper, and a reporter for each group. So what I will suggest is if you are numbered 1, you be the note taker. If you're 2, you be the timekeeper. And if you're 3, you be the reporter. You don't have to stick with that. That's just a suggestion in the interest of time. For the reporters, you're going to be the people who are going to speak for your group at the end of the session. So if you don't like public speaking, this is a good chance for you to give that task to someone else in your group. Basically, we'll go around at the end of the evening and say, what kinds of things did you talk about in your group? What were some aha moments? Where are you in terms of your thinking? What has changed? What still needs to be answered? Those kinds of questions. There are 4 stations, as I mentioned. That means you have 20 minutes in each station, so you have to be on task, like we like to tell our students. And you will need to have your timekeeper make sure to keep an eye on the time and on the clock. For station 1, we have cost considerations. That's with Lorraine Finnegan from SMMA and Mike Burton from Doran Whittier and others. And Anush and Mike Dowen are also in that group. They're going to be talking about a number of essential questions. I'm just going to read those so that everybody can focus on what's going to come out of these various stations. They're going to be trying to answer questions such as what design options are being considered and what are the associated economic and environmental costs. How do upfront investments in the integrated design policy quickly pay for themselves, and what are the economic and environmental benefits? Every dollar counts. Why do districts have different square footage calculations, and is there anything that we can learn from them to keep our costs down? Some of these, by the way, you'll recognize as questions you may have asked, so we try to include those in the process. The 4th bullet is the high school land is wet and swampy. If building on fields becomes the preferred option, how can the project team ensure it can be done and done affordably? What are the financial implications of Article 97 land swap issues, and how common are they in school construction? And then at the last summit, there was general consensus that a renovated or small field house would be the way to go, and we would not move forward with a pool. Does this match your understanding? How has your thinking changed? And does this match your understanding? If so, how? How has your thinking changed? And there are a number of resources linked under each section. So if you have your device with you, you'll be able to access additional data under the links. On Station 2, we have financial implications for Lexington taxpayers. This is 20 minutes with Carolyn Kosnoff and Mike Cronin. Jacob is also going to be joining this group, Jacob Greco from Doran Whittier. They're going to be answering questions like, based on the most recent cost estimates, what is the anticipated impact on Lexington taxpayers? And what are the costs and consequences of a phased approach to school construction? The third station is Bloom, Weave, and the challenges associated with renovations, ad renos, phasing, and delays. So 20 minutes will be spent answering questions such as what two design options are currently under consideration and why, what makes a renovation or an ad reno so challenging and why were they ruled out as an option, what are the costs and implications of delaying a vote on November 12th or at any time throughout the process, and do the phased design plans being promoted in the citizens petition address the educational plan? If not, what is not being addressed and why is it a problem? Our facilitators for that session include Brian Black, Tom Faust, Aaron Prestilio, and Christina Del Angelo. The first three individuals are from SMMA. The last person is from Doran Whittier. And the final discussion will be of enrollment and MBTA zoning bylaw changes. This is in Station 4. Dr. Maureen Kavanaugh and I will facilitate this session. Rosemary Park and Phil Poinelli will join us from SMMA, along with others, I think. Our essential questions are, what are MBTA bylaw zoning changes? How is Lexington's approach to them different than other cities and towns, and why is this a challenge? What are the known housing developments, and how is LPS adjusting its enrollment projections? And what planning exercises is LPS engaged in to address Lexington's zoning bylaw challenges? Again, a number of links to information that could be useful to you. And after we go through those 4 stations, that'll take us around 80 minutes. We all come back together as a large group where the reporter will share out from the 4 groups, you'll have 5 to 10 minutes to cover A, any highlights from your conversations at each station, so aha moments, big picture kinds of things that came up, and B, in what ways has your thinking about the high school project changed or has it not changed, and sort of where are you in the process would be really helpful for us. So that is the agenda. Any questions before we get started? Sure. So I think we'll send, if it's okay with group 1, we'll send you to the conference area around the hall. I can take you there. Groups 2, 3, and 4 will remain here. Where is group 2? Did you place them already? Okay, great. And group 3? And group 4? Oh, you were gonna go? Then let's do that. Where's group 1? Okay, 1 stay here then. Group 4, hit the road. All right, that's good. All right, thanks everybody. All right, we're going to come on back, and this is the report out section. We have about 45 minutes, a little less, to do some reporting out. Who are my reporters for each group? Raise your hand, please.
I'm not getting text.
Okay, I see 1, 2. Okay. And what we're going to do in this section is to really try to express what happened in your station rotation, and then talk about what has changed in your thinking or your group's thinking. And the groups will, not everybody will have a chance to weigh in probably, but if you hear the report out and you want to add something, just let us know. So I'm going to start. Glenn, what group are you? We'll start from 4 and we'll work our way backwards. Is that okay or no? No, he doesn't want to start at 4. Where's 1? Do you mind starting? He doesn't want to start either, but here you go, Sanjay.
So do you want us to report on all 4 stations? Please.
Do one station at a
One station at a time.
It's going to go longer if we do that, so you can.
Dump all the information you know. Yeah.
Do all 4 because we're going to go over a lot.
I'll put it away.
Exactly. That was, Sanjay was great.
You want to pass it to each group each time? It's going to take a lot
No,
longer.
just do all 4. We trust you.
Yeah, I think you need to do 4.
Just tell us when you break each of them.
All right. So I'm just going to, I didn't have a chance to discuss with my group what I'm going to say. So I'm just going to say it and then they can object. So for station number 1, this was the cost considerations. One discussion was about comparison with other neighboring school districts that have also gone through a high school process, and why there are some differences, especially about the Arlington High School, which I think there was a $200 per square foot difference between that and the estimated cost for the new LHS. And we were given some information. I believe there is a memo that has been sent to Joe that you will circulate, Joe. Yeah, but not completely apples to apples, but there's a lot of differences of the Arlington High School, and we found out that they also went through a significant reduction in cost from SD to DD phase. So that was one thing. Then the Waltham High School has 90,000 square feet over 14 classrooms. That was another data point that we got. There was a suggestion to look at, when we're looking at these costs, not to ignore the life cycle costs, because a lot of the stuff that we are including in our LHS project is also going to help us long-term in operation costs. And the other point was about the rebates that we might be getting for some of these energy improvements. Those rebates don't have to be bonded over the 30 years or 40 years that we are planning for the rest of the high school. So that is another consideration. But at some point, there was a discussion about if we get to a place where we need to cut costs significantly, what would we do? Would we not do some of those sustainability measures? I don't think we answered that. We said we'll just think about it if the time comes, or when the time comes. There's still a lot of decisions to be made. Best practices are in the estimate. And then once we have agreement with the MSBA, we cannot change the educational plan, but we can do value engineering and bring down the cost. So that was. Yeah, so about Article 97 before the field house. Article 97, it's a one-for-one land swap for Bloom. For the Bloom option, for the Weave option, we don't need to do a land swap, obviously. Then ground improvements are in the budget and are adequate. Something about the caissons not being, I don't know what the caissons are, but that's not. Okay. And then for the field house, I think the recommendation from the people in our group was that we should build in the renovation now and save for a small footprint new field house for the future. All right. On to station 2. The taxpayer impact is roughly 9 to 11%. The 440 Bedford Street project is actually adding in our favor to that. It does not include the capital stabilization fund. We are estimating by the time we go into bonding this project, we'll be requiring we will be at around 40 million. at the time of taxpayer impact. Again, no energy rebates have been factored in that, and that's roughly about 45 million is what I heard. And the 9 to 11% taxpayer impact is actually going to come over a 3-year period. So you're not all 11% is coming on year one. So over the 3 years. And then FY28 through FY30, there is some drop off in debt that's projected, but it also depends on what other projects are going to follow the LHS. Phased approach, we cannot leave all other buildings just by doing one small portion of or 200,000 square foot of one building, because then everything else has to also be brought up to code. And that's going to be significant. I heard a 9-digit cost for doing that. Station 3, this is the citizens petition. And we were looking at options. Sorry. For this, why are we locking into this November 12th date was one of the questions. And that's basically back calculated from the February MSBA meeting. I believe the December 16th is the deadline to submit for that meeting. And that requires about a month's worth of work. So that's why the November 12th deadline. The ad reno challenges options, or I guess that's the weave option for the building are basically because of the 70 years old design. So you got columns and bays and ceiling heights that are not optimum. There's temporary systems going to be needed if you have to keep the building operational while you're constructing other portions of the building. But at the end, both Bloom and Weave will end up with the same option, same result. So the final educational program will be satisfied by either option. We still have to think about noise and vibration issues and any programmatic loss during the construction phases. One suggestion was to make sure that we build as much flexibility into the building for the future so that 50, 70 years from now, another group is not looking at us saying, what were they thinking when they approved this design? And maybe just having that list of those types of flexibility documented somewhere would be a useful thing. And finally, Station 4, which is the impact of the enrollment and MBTA zoning. Surprisingly, I've seen that the birth rates are coming down, and the enrollment rates are coming down, and that might be linked to the birth rates, because what I'm hearing is that it's a national trend, not just a local Lexington trend. So that might be an explanation. The good news is that the MBTA communities zoning that has been approved is dispersed, so no one school is going to feel the full impact of a new MBTA community. Student densities are higher in apartments versus condos. The enrollment data comparison with neighboring towns is something that we requested, because it's interesting to see that Lexington is dropping off, but is that the case for the neighboring towns as well, like Bedford or Waltham or Burlington, which are less expensive compared to Lexington? Or is this related to the cost of within Lexington being so high that families can't afford to move in here? So I think that's what we were trying to tease out there. The low cohort is being balanced by the increase in MBTA, so it seems like it might be just a wash. But again, time will tell. And there are 3 strategies to increase the design capacity that's currently in the plan. That's the 2,395 students in the LHS building. And one is to increase the number of students per class, replace the central administration spaces that are planned for the new LHS with classroom spaces, and increase the utilization rates beyond 85%. I don't know to what, whether it's 95 or 98. And then there are other strategies beyond that in order to maybe build a new middle school rather than a new high school if it starts becoming too big a class size for LHS. And finally, there's a letter sent out to the MSBA asking for more money. And the November 12th meeting has been granted.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. So who's the Group 2 reporter? Alan? Alan, you're going to identify new information, or try to. Yeah, this is true. This is true. And while they're working this out, I also had people recording. So if you were a recorder, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you're not actually physically reporting out, send me your notes so that we can give those to Jacob, and he's doing our minutes, so that will be helpful to us, and type them up. Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, Ren Bassick from the Rec Committee and representing Group 2. Feel free if I missed anything to add. So we actually started, I'm going to sit down, just convenience. We started in session 2, and it was actually convenient because on this learning journey together, we actually started with establishing what the baseline proposals were in terms of understanding what's included in the proposal. So it was the central office, new field, the renovated field house, the ground source heat was included, as well as sod, as well as all net zero from day one instead of just net zero ready, which we talked a little bit later. The other things, we did a deep dive into finances, particularly the 9 to 11% that we heard, benefiting from some new growth from a new business. But the other big things that came into was this trend from like a lot more additional housing coming on, is that we're shifting potentially from capital tax base to a residential tax base. And so the impact of that is not fully understood, and what that actually means in terms of our future kind of operating budget. There was some discussion around just the interest, just how much interest. It was about $1 billion over 30 years for some of the proposals. But then there was a discussion, well, how much of the cost of the high school actually needed to be funded at 30 years? And there was like an estimate of something like 75% of it would be 30%, and a portion of it could potentially be funded not within a 30-year bond. And then I think it was already stated about, rebates were not included. The capital stabilization fund was not included. And that also really important to know is that the rebates don't actually come in until like 1 to 2 years after go live. So you actually have to have all the systems operating before you can actually start to realize some of those rebates. Anybody from the group have anything else to say about Station 2?
Please be careful. It wasn't $1 billion of interest. It was the total debt service, principal and interest combined.
Thank you. Okay. No claps required. And I had somebody cover most of the notes already, so thank you. Then we moved on to Station 3. One of the big discussions was about the environmental impact between the two different systems. And one of the things that was noted is that when you're going through a transition, like if you're doing the kind of renovating space, there's a lot of intermediate materials that have to be used, all the modulars that need to be used. And so there's actually potentially larger environmental impact by doing the renovate in place, or the replace in place, or whatever, I forget what it's called. But because you have to have a lot of throwaway material to do the connectivity between all the buildings, have all the modulars, which you otherwise would not need to do if you were building on the field. So that was a learning for myself. I think there was a lot of interest in understanding what was the total environmental impact between the two system approaches. The other thing about the building or proposal in phases is just the details around how would you connect all of these buildings, the actual details of the educational component. If you were only to build, I think it was something like an 8 or 9 story building that needed to be built in place instead of I think it was the arts building. I don't remember. World language. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. So there was basically a lot more detail needs to be put into that proposal before it can be considered equivalent to the other ones. Then we went to station 4. We talked again a lot about enrollment. Past history is not always a good indication of future. That was kind of the general theme that I picked up from that. But there was a lot of analysis into the difference between, or a future analysis that's going to be about the difference between apartments and condos and 1 bedroom, 2 or 3. So kind of what are the loading factors when you start considering all those combinations. There was some discussion about whether we're trending upward or downward, and it's hard to predict, but right now things are looking good, but being able to protect for the variability that we've seen is kind of one of the advantages of the current proposal, is that it protects for potential upside. Is there anything else from Station 4 that was noteworthy? Do you have anything else? Station 4 was about enrollment,
Which is good.
Yeah, nicely distributed. Yeah, just because they can't hear you. Yeah.
Dr. Hackett briefly reviewed some examples of strategies to deal with very high, in case there is perhaps unlikely case that there's very high growth in enrollments. And she also discussed the letter, I think, that she wrote to the MSBA, Ray, regarding the MBTA zoning experience so far.
Thank you. Then we moved on to Station 1. We talked a little bit about the difference between net zero ready and net zero from day one, and how that potentially is advantageous. We heard also about some comparisons to other high schools and some of the kind of estimate challenges that they ran into, particularly around whether their site was geothermal ready. And so one of the things that we're proactively doing is trying to evaluate the compatibility with geothermal wells in advance of some of these estimates. What else? And then there was a discussion about designing for office versus classroom, and the price differences, a little bit about how to design around to basically make sure that it is retrofittable to a classroom if necessary. And so that is being considered in the design, which we all, I think, it was good to hear that. I think everybody seemed to be nodding that we're protecting for that contingency, if that's even the right word for that. But, I think that's it. That is most of my notes.
Who's next?
Group 3? Group 3? Great. There you go.
Well, folks, coming this late, it's going to be difficult to find something significantly different. Let me just summarize what was the thrust of our first position was with regard to functioning with financing and other aspects. And it was a very detailed look at the pluses and minuses between Weave and Bloom. And the conclusion that I think we all held, stop me if disagreeing, that the pricing was more expensive for doing it in place. There were many advantages to having it out on the street, and therefore, I think the conclusion from the pluses and minuses from a financial standpoint is that we are better off with Bloom and doing it in the land and ensuring, which for me, I'll say, at least individually, the most important factor that was crossing my mind as I was thinking of the two approaches, both Weave and Bloom, my highest priority with the students. And therefore, the difference between the educational process occurring while there was a correction and updating to the existing building versus what can continue routinely there, and therefore the 90+% of the noise and other confusion for the students all staying in the main building now was mitigated very much by the pluses that were to be had from doing the new construction out on the street. After that, we went to schools, and there was deep consideration and explanation of the student loads and projections and not projections, but there was very little that was going to be done materially different in the design of the schools. Was based on the long-term planning, but making sure that at least for the moderate turnpike, that we still have a design that is supportive of the education needs within the schools, which to me is the primary purpose of the school. And then finally, we ended up with talking about the financial side of many aspects of taking care of this very complex provisioning that we're talking about. There were analyses of both design and physical changes that would have some bearing on it. And the field house was considered with regard to the decision on going as may well be the existing field house moderated within range that keeps it MSBA eligible. And then there was also, as previously mentioned, that there are some rebates coming our way, and there is still the determination about how those funds would be allocated, whether it was near-term offsets to costs or whether it could be laid out to provide detents to some of the longer year payments that would otherwise be the case. And that pretty much covers the rough ranges of what we were looking at, and the predecessors have filled all the details that I don't have recorded. Thank you.
All right, I'll bring us home. I'm Glenn Barker, Chair of the Appropriation Committee in Group 4. I'll just go through some quick takeaways that I got from each of our stations. So we started number 4, looking at the enrollment issues. And I think the thing that I found interesting was that a great deal of very specific research has been developed about how we have occupancy rates and the contribution of different sized dwelling units to the specific school enrollment that we have. And that's going to be very useful, I think, in predicting our future enrollment impact, although it's still very hard to tell, of course, what really happens when people start moving into town. But the fact that we have that data now and we can really point to that and say, this is exactly how it works right now, it's very useful for us because we're trying to figure out what, what the actual impact will be and what the risks are. So moving on to Station 1, this was cost considerations. I think the most interesting takeaway there was that we're actually needing a very near-term decision on what to do about the field house, whether we want to actually have a larger field house or not, because the architects need to set aside space for that. And if they do, then that will impact all the other areas around it all, especially all the other playing fields. And that has not been confirmed yet. So we're actually waiting for that decision. I don't know how it's going to go. But I do think it's important for us to figure out what we want to do there, in terms of the cost and the space allocation. I asked about field ground preparation, and they point out that modern, the last 10 so years, there's been a great deal of improvement in the nature of ground improvements. So you don't necessarily have to rely on pilings anymore, which is what the current high school uses. And the newer ground improvement, which is stacking stone, basically densifying the soil, is a more cost-effective way to proceed. So that sounds great to me. Station number 2, the financial implications. I've already spent too long thinking about that. I do think there's a lot of moving parts, as we know. We need to figure out a very big and elaborate debt schedule for how we manage all that, and how we also incorporate all the other things that are coming in terms of more capital projects, other potential changes in revenue to the town as our pension fund gets fully funded, all sorts of other things that could happen in the next 5 to 10 years that will impact how we manage our cash flow. And we, it's a big piece. It's a big thing to try and figure out. But we will do something about it soon. Let's see. Final station was number 3, which was the actual models here. I don't think we had a whole lot of new insights there. It was actually great to just talk about the designs with the architects and why they had thought about certain things. What I liked was that there's still quite a bit of flexibility in their minds in how the designs are going to turn out. This is still very rough. They're still looking at switching major chunks of the building around to different locations to improve connectivity with related programs. Bringing different types of this particularly the Bloom design is serving so many features and functions around the perimeter of the school that you're bringing in lab in one section, loading docks in one section, buses in one section, car drop in one section, and just have all this transportation that's circulating around the building, but not really connecting to each other. But each part of the building, each corner of the building is providing a different function. I thought that was actually a pretty interesting part of the design. And I'll wrap it up at that.
The reporters did an excellent job. Thank you. Very detailed and thoughtful analysis, and it shows me that the conversations were productive and meaningful. Anybody have anything that they want to add that they think is really important that might have been overlooked?
Thanks, Julie. Sean Osborne, Appropriation Committee. Going back to what David said about Bloom versus Weave, I think it's really important that came out in our conversation with the designers was to think about, yes, at the end, they will all meet the same educational goals, but what the impact would be on the students, especially when we look at Weave and what it means to have these irregular times of changing of how you get from class to class and where you go. It's hard enough for me when I was injured in high school to do that. But if you're having to do that on a regular basis, also thinking about the 4 seasons, that was really important part of the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. That was excellent. Anybody else going once, going twice? Claire, and I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute, Mr. Lucente.
I got to do 2 of these today, so I'm feeling really well-versed with things. But there's one thing that I heard today that I don't know that the community has widely appreciated, especially those putting forward the phased construction one, and that is that once we start meaningfully altering the envelope of any of our buildings, we trigger code. And every other aspect of the building has to be brought up to code. So this idea that we can build a tower, as long as we have students in the other buildings, those buildings are gonna have to be brought up to code. So we're talking meaningful investment in buildings that may or may not live in perpetuity beyond that. So I just really think that's the most compelling argument for not seriously considering a phased, let's build a little bit more. Can't, or at least not without making hundreds of millions of dollars investment in a building that we've already decided isn't worth saving.
Thank you for that. I think with that, I will give this to you. And I want to thank our facilitators who did a great job. Thanks for the public who showed up. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Dr. Hackett, again for putting this all together. So at this point, I think we all have a little homework to do on our committees and probably some additional discussions. I know some have maybe communicated their wishes and interests to the school building committee, but you have till sometime between now and the 12th. So I would say get to it if you want to give them feedback on any of the topics that that came up tonight that you maybe didn't get a chance as a board or committee to meet with your fellow board or committee members. So with that, I will, we're going to ask each group to adjourn. So we'll start with the school committee. Ms. Sani?
So I request that the school committee adjourns. Can I have a second? Kathleen seconds and roll call vote. Oh, no, we want to.
Oh, no roll call. You just, all those in favor.
All those in favor, aye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lamb for the Capital Expenditures Committee.
Have a motion to adjourn the Capital Expenditures Committee. Second. And we're unanimous. Thank you.
And Mr. Parker?
Mr. Erickson, I have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.
All right, Ms. Linehan.
Would you like to make a motion to?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the school building committee.
Excellent, second, and we're all, yes, aye.
Okay, and we did not get a quorum, although we had 3 members of the Recreation Committee. We appreciate their participation. We did not get a quorum, so they don't need to adjourn. But for the Select Board, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded by all those in favor say aye. Aye. We are unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I will not.
It has started here.
Thank you.
I'm like, what the hell is this? But